You might be wondering, why in the world is there a 30-minute countdown before the show starts? Well, we actually start live every day at 4 p.m. Eastern time, so this whole 30-minute countdown is a chance for YouTube and Rumble to send out their alerts and notifications, so we encourage you to gather up and hang out with everyone in the chat room. So every day at 4 p.m. Eastern time is when we do this show live. You can join us for the countdown if you like, or just set your clock and reminder that at 4 p.m. Eastern is when we go live. You can also make sure you subscribe and turn on that bell notification, so hopefully you will get a notification.
What do you have to say about dictators of countries like Indonesia, who we sell weapons to, yet they are slaughtering people in East Timor? What do you have to say about Israel, who is slaughtering Palestinians, who impose martial law? What do you have to say about that? Those are our allies. Why do we sell weapons to these countries? Why do we support them? Why do we bomb Iraq when it commits similar problems?
There are various examples of things that are not right in this world, and the United States is trying. I really am surprised that people feel that it is necessary to defend the rights of Saddam Hussein, when what we ought to be thinking about is how to make sure that he does not use weapons of mass destruction.
I'd like to...
Who are shouting? Just a moment.
I'm not defending him in the least. What I am saying is that there needs to be consistent application of U.S. foreign policy. We cannot support people who are committing the same violations because they are political allies. That is not acceptable. We cannot violate UN resolutions when it is convenient to us. You're not answering my question, Madam Albright.
You briefed the press, did you not, when you were there?
Well, I had several jobs. One of my jobs was that of analyst. I also was an interrogator and indeed briefed the press when we, the CIA, wanted to circulate disinformation on a particular issue. Disinformation is not necessarily a lie. It may be a half-truth. And we would pick out a journalist. I would go do the briefing and hope that he would put the information in print.
What was your percentage of success?
We were pretty successful in planting information of a rather rarefied nature. For instance, if we wanted to get across to the American public that the North Vietnamese were building up their force structure in South Vietnam, I would go to a journalist and advise him that in the past 6 months, X number of North Vietnamese forces had come down the Ho Chi Minh Trail system through southern Laos. Now, there is no way a journalist can check that information. That's data derived from radio intercepts, spy in the sky photography. So either he goes with the information or he doesn't, and ordinarily or usually, the journalist would go with it because it looked like some kind of exclusive. Go after these gentlemen. I would be directed to cultivate them, to spend time with them at the Caravel Hotel or the Continental Hotel, to socialize with them, and slowly but surely to try to gain their confidence by dolloping out valid information which was true. And then I would drop into a conversation the data that we wanted to get across, which might not be true. One piece of data, for instance, that we managed to plan in the New Yorker magazine had to do with a supposed North Vietnamese effort in 1973 to develop airfields along the border of South Vietnam. The reason we wanted to plant this information was that we were trying to persuade the U.S. Congress that Saigon should continue to get a great deal of aid, and that the North Vietnamese were the chief violators of the ceasefire accord. That was printed in the New Yorker magazine under the byline of Robert Chaplin, as indeed was a great deal of such information which we tried to circulate.
Frank, a two-part question. What were the objectives of or what was the objective of the CIA What about the moral implications of what you were doing in feeding disinformation? Did the objective override the moral implications, moral problems?
Well, the objective of the agency in general is to generate intelligence and get it back to Washington, to get at the truth and make sure the policymakers understand it. When you plant disinformation, you are diverging from that objective, and I think probably in retrospect, it was very counterproductive. I am, as an ex-CIA agent, opposed to the disinformation activities in which I was involved. I admit that I was involved, and I think it served no useful purpose. Propagandizing the American public or Congress is not the CIA's job. As to the morality of what the CIA was doing or that particular activity, the war was a very relative thing. It was a relativist environment, and morality seldom came into play when you were operating in the field. In my estimation, a CIA man should be amoral. That may sound pretty shocking to somebody, but what if my morality were that of a Nazi or agent, if you will? You wouldn't want me to be your intelligence officer. Keep the morals out of intelligence. Keep the truth in, and stay away from disinformation.
It would have been more appropriate for Mr. Trudeau, Prime Minister of Canada, to address this House according to Article 144, an article which was specifically designed to debate violations of human rights, democracy, and the rule of law, which is clearly the case with Mr. Trudeau. Then again, a Prime Minister who openly admires the Chinese basic dictatorship, who tramples on fundamental rights by persecuting and criminalizing his own citizens as terrorists just because they dared to stand up to his perverted concept of democracy, should not be allowed to speak in this House at all. Mr. Trudeau, you are a disgrace for any democracy. Please spare us your presence. Thank you.
And it might sound radical, colleagues, but the answer to war is not more war, it's peace. And peace isn't delivered by the barrel of a gun, it's delivered by diplomacy, by dialogue. You can wish away your continent's history, but we share a continent with Russia. We will sit down with Russia. There will be a negotiated peace, and this organisation should be promoting it earlier rather than delaying it and making sure that more Ukrainians die. Your feigning of sympathy rings hollow. It makes me sick, to be honest with you.
We become involved when disinformation poses a threat to the security of our country. It is when there's a connectivity to a threat to our country. It could be a threat, a connectivity to violence. And what this working group does, is precisely what I would think you would want it to do, which is to take a look at the work, the disinformation work that our department has done, and ask the following questions. Do we have policies? Do we have guardrails? Do we have standards?
But here's the problem. We can't even agree. We can't even agree what disinformation is. You can't even agree that it was disinformation, that the Russians fed information to the Steele dossier. If you can't agree to that, how are we ever going to come to an agreement on what is disinformation so you can police it on social media?
Senator, I have 2 points, if I may finish. Number one, that what this office, what this working group does, because it's not an office, what this working group does is ensure that there are guardrails, definitions, standards to make sure that the free speech rights, the civil rights, civil liberties, and privacy rights of individuals.
So do you think COVID disinformation threatens our national security?
And number two, if I may, Senator, and number two, is it your proposition that when the cartels spread disinformation with respect to our immigration policies to try to lure vulnerable migrants to our border illegally?
I think you've got no idea what disinformation is, and I don't think the government's capable of it. Do you know who the greatest propagator of disinformation in the history of the world is? The U.S. government. Are you familiar with McNamara, the Pentagon Papers? Are you familiar with George W. Bush and the weapons of mass destruction? Are you familiar with Iran-Contra? I mean, think of all the debates and disputes we've had over the last 50 years in our country. We work them out by debating them. We don't work them out by the government being the arbiter. I don't want guardrails. I want you to have nothing to do with speech. You think we can't determine, speech by traffickers is disinformation? You think the American people are so stupid they need you to tell them what the truth is? You can't even admit what the truth is with the Steele dossier. I don't trust government to figure out what the truth is. Government is largely disseminating disinformation.
You would know this this is a bit of an aside, but in terms of how you think about problem sets, when I was a cadet, what's the cadet motto at West Point? You will not lie, cheat, or steal, or tolerate those who do. I was the CIA director. We lied, we cheated, we stole. It was like we had entire training courses.
We had a good discussion on ensuring global energy security and adequate oil supplies to support global economic growth, and that will begin shortly. I'm doing all I can to increase the supply for the United States of America, which I expect to happen. The Saudis share that urgency, and based on our discussions today, I expect we'll see further steps in the coming weeks.
Are you worried about
Hey everyone, just as a reminder, our show starts at 4 p.m. Eastern Time, just a few minutes from now, but I should remind you that we have a daily newsletter. It's totally free. Natalie and I work very hard on it every morning over a cup of coffee, putting the stories together that we think are important that the mainstream media is going to ignore. All you need to do is go to our website. It's just redacted.inc. Put in your email address. We won't ever sell your email to anybody. And then you'll receive a welcome email. And all you need to do is verify that email, and 7 a.m. Eastern Time is when we send out our daily newsletter. And it's about 5 or 10 minutes in length that you can read it over your cup of coffee. And like I said, we cover 4 or 5 of the big stories of the day, plus a couple of things you might have missed while you were sleeping. We try to have some fun with it, add a little humor into it. And again, it's a great way to start off your morning. But it's also a great way for us to stay connected with you as well, because we've been banned and blocked on some of these platforms before, where we haven't been allowed to post anything, not even a community post. So the only way for us to stay connected with you is through our newsletter. We were able to send out a newsletter and say, hey everyone, we're blocked for the next week, and let you know what was actually going on with our show. Anyway, go to redacted.inc and sign up for the free newsletter, and it'll be posted first thing in the morning over your cup of coffee.
One of the hopeful things that I've discovered is that nearly every war that has started in the past 50 years has been a result of media lies. The media could have stopped it if they had searched deep enough. If they hadn't reprinted government propaganda, they could have stopped it. But what does that mean? Well, that means basically populations don't like wars. And populations have to be fooled into wars. Populations don't willingly and with open eyes go into a war. So if we have a good media environment, then we'll also have a peaceful environment.
You killed a million people in Iraq.
That is a separate...
You killed a million people in Iraq. It's incredible that you have the brass neck to be sitting here now urging another Iraq war.
George,
after
if
what
I
you've
was
already
still in
done.
Parliament,
There can be no doubt that Saddam Hussein has biological weapons and the capability to rapidly produce more, many more. And he has the ability to dispense these lethal poisons and diseases in ways that can cause massive death and destruction. If biological weapons seem too terrible to contemplate, chemical weapons are equally chilling. UNMOVIC already laid out much of this, and it is documented for all of us to read in UNSCOM's 1999 report on the subject. If we consider just one category of missing weaponry, 6,500 bombs from the Iran-Iraq war, UNMOVIC says the amount of chemical agent in them would be in the order of 1,000 tons. These quantities of chemical weapons are now unaccounted for. Dr. Blick says, quipped that, quote, mustard gas is not marmalade. You are supposed to know what you did with it. We believe Saddam Hussein knows what he did with it, and he has not come clean with the international community. We have evidence these weapons existed. What we don't have is evidence from Iraq that they have been destroyed or where they are. That is what we are still waiting for.
Okay, inspection worth doing, everybody's agreed it's worth doing, and it gets stopped.
Yes, sir.
At that moment, we're an automatic pilot as far as you're concerned. Period. No ifs, ands, or buts. Now, I respect that. But now, it seems to me the Secretary of State might have a slightly different problem. Secretary of State might be sitting there and saying, now look over there on that side. Now, I remember so-and-so and so-and-so and so-and-so, and the 12 people on this side, they're all the ones that said they didn't want to use force. Now, I'm going to have to go tell the president now that we should, or Secretary Cohen, unleash whatever it takes to get it done. And our military assessment is the same as the majors. The majors' assessment is, privately held but publicly acknowledged later, that airstrikes alone aren't going to do this. Saddam's not going to cave on this. So, now here's the deal. I recommended the president have at it and let the chips fall where they may. A reasonable position for the Secretary of Defense, the Secretary of State to take. But I respectfully suggest, Major, I respectfully suggest they have a responsibility slightly above your pay grade. Slightly above your pay grade. To decide whether or not to take the nation to war alone, or to take the nation to war partway, or to take the nation to war halfway. That's a real tough decision. That's why they get paid the big bucks. That's why they get the limos and you don't. I mean this sincerely. I'm not trying to be flip, because I think, and that's why I said at the outset, the reason why I'm glad you did what you did, we should come to our milk. We should make a decision. But in terms of whether the Secretary of State has no more to consider than you do as the arms inspector. You didn't get in, didn't get my job done, get me in. Period. You made the deal, right? That's the deal. A deal's a deal. Get me in. Scott Ritter, I'm ready to go. It's not how it works. Now, maybe it should work that way. But wouldn't you acknowledge that if you were President of the United States or the Secretary of State, you'd sit there and say, now, okay, if old Scotty boy didn't get in, we said he should get in, we want him to get in, it's important that he does get in. They're not going to let him in, so what are we going to do now? We know that France and Russia aren't going to be with us. We're quite confident China's not. We've already run those traps. They're not there. We're not sure where the United States Senate is, but have at it, boys. Go get them. And by the way, Scott and the boys say air power's not enough. I think it's a legitimate debate, Scott, Major. I think it's a legitimate debate. But I don't think we should be putting it in the context of, you have somebody up there at state saying, look, how can we weasel out of this agreement? We want to let this guy out there hanging. We're not this. It's a very practical political decision. Same kind of decision General Powell made. Same kind of decision President Bush made. Every president, every Secretary of State has to do it. Like I said, they get paid more than you. Their job's a hell of a lot more complicated than yours. They may have made the wrong decision, and you brought it to light. We should address it. We should say straight up where we are, and we should do it. And for that, I thank you. But it's above your pay grade.
I
About 10 days after 9/11, I went through the Pentagon, and one of the generals called me and he said, "Sir, you got to come in and talk to me a second." He says, "We've made the decision. We're going to war with Iraq." I said, "We're going to war with Iraq? Why?" He said, "I don't know." He said, "I guess they don't know what else to do." He said, "I guess it's like we don't know what to do about terrorists, but we got a good military and we can take down governments." And he said, "I guess if the only tool you have is a hammer, every problem has to look like a nail." So I came back to see him a few weeks later, and by that time we were bombing in Afghanistan. I said, "Are we still going to war with Iraq?" And he said, "Oh, it's worse than that." He reached over on his desk, he picked up a piece of paper. He said, "I just got this down from upstairs," meaning the Secretary of Defense's office today, and he said, "This is a memo that describes how we're going to take out 7 countries in 5 years, starting with Iraq and then Syria, Lebanon, Libya, Somalia, Sudan, and finishing off Iran."
Hey everyone, Clayton here. The show is going to start at 4 p.m. Eastern Time. I should remind you that we have a VIP community. It's our Redacted Rebel VIP community. Now, this show is totally free, what you're watching right now, right? You can subscribe here on YouTube and Rumble, totally free. But if you'd like to support independent journalism, we are run by you. Without you guys, we wouldn't be able to do this show. We wouldn't be able to hire the team that we have. We wouldn't be able to afford the servers that we have. We wouldn't be able to afford the reporters that we have, the team that we have. So you can support us by going to redacted.inc, and on the right side of your screen, you'll see a VIP community button. Just click that, and for the price of a cup of coffee once a month, you can support us. We put out exclusive content, early interviews that no one else will see, live streams just for our VIP Rebel community. So again, it's totally free to watch this show, but if you do want to support independent journalism, we would really appreciate it. Come on over to redacted.inc, click on that community button, and decide if you want to sign up or not. It's totally up to you. We thank you. And meanwhile, the show will start in just a few moments at 4 p.m. Eastern Time.
Well, one of the 4 principal functions of the CIA is to gather intelligence and ideally forward it to the president, the users of information, the policymakers, as they say. There are other functions, however, some of them more legitimate than others. One is to run secret wars, the covert action that's written and talked about so much, like what's happening in Nicaragua today from Honduras. Another thing is to disseminate propaganda to influence people's minds, and this is a major function of the CIA. And unfortunately, of course, it overlaps into the gathering of information. You have contact with a journalist, you will give him true stories, you'll get information from him, you'll also give him false stories. For example, in my war, the Angola war that I helped to manage, 1/3 of my staff was propaganda. Ironically, it's called covert action inside the CIA. Outside, that means the violent part. I had propagandists all over the world, principally in London, Kinshasa, and Zambia. We would take stories which we would write and put them in the Zambia Time, and then pull them out and send them to a journalist on our payroll in Europe. But his cover story, you see, would be that he'd gotten them from his stringer in Lusaka, who had gotten them from the Zambia Time. We had the complicity of the government of Zambia, Kenneth Kaunda, if you will, to put these false stories into his newspapers. But after that point, the journalists, Reuters and AFP, the management was not witting of it. Now, our contact man in Europe was, and we pumped just dozens of stories about Cuban atrocities, Cuban rapists. In one case, we had the Cuban rapists caught and tried by the Ovimbundu maidens who had been their victims, and then we ran photographs that made almost every newspaper in the country of the Cubans being executed by the Ovimbundu women who supposedly had been their victims.
These were fake photos?
Oh, absolutely. We didn't know of one single atrocity committed by the Cubans. It was pure, raw, false propaganda to create an illusion of communists, eating babies for breakfast and that sort of totally false propaganda.
The only reason that I'm allowed to ask you this question is because today the federal court ruled that the government doesn't have the right to determine who is or is not a journalist. This is the second election in a row that the court had to overturn your government. Do you still insist on being able to make that decision, and why?
First of all, questions around accreditation were handled by the press gallery and the consortium of networks who have strong perspectives on quality journalism and the important information that is shared with Canadians. The reality is organizations like yours that continue to spread misinformation and disinformation on the science around vaccines, around how we're going to actually get through this pandemic and be there for each other and keep our kids safe, is part of why we're seeing such unfortunate anger and lack of understanding of basic science. And quite frankly, I won't call it a media organization, your group of individuals need to take accountability for some of the polarization that we're seeing in this country. And I think Canadians are cluing into the fact that there is a really important decision we take about the kind of country we want to see. And I salute all extraordinary, hardworking journalists that put science and facts at the heart of what they do and ask me tough questions every day, but make sure that they are educating and informing Canadians from a broad range of perspectives, which is the last thing that you guys do.
Whatever our hopes may be for the future, for reducing this threat or living with it, there is no escaping either the gravity or the totality of its challenge to our survival and to our security. A challenge that confronts us in unaccustomed ways in every sphere of human activity. This deadly challenge imposes upon our society two requirements of direct concern, both to the press and to the President. Two requirements that may seem almost contradictory in tone, but which must be reconciled and fulfilled if we are to meet this national peril. I refer first to the need for far greater public information, and second, to the need for far greater official secrecy. The very word secrecy is repugnant in a free and open society, and we are, as a people, inherently and historically opposed to secret societies, to secret oaths, and to secret proceedings. We decided long ago that the dangers of excessive and unwarranted concealment of pertinent facts far outweighed the dangers which are cited to justify it. Even today, there is little value in opposing the threat of a closed society by imitating its arbitrary restrictions. Even today, there is little value in ensuring the survival of our nation if our traditions do not survive with it. And there is very grave danger that an announced need for increased security will be seized upon by those anxious to expand its meaning to the very limits of official censorship and concealment. That I do not intend to permit to the extent that it's in my control. And no official of my administration, whether his rank is high or low, civilian or military, should interpret my words here tonight as an excuse to censor the news, to stifle dissent, to cover up our mistakes, or to withhold from the press and the public the facts they deserve to know.
Let us know where you're joining us from around the world on YouTube, Rumble, and Twitter. So glad to have you here. We've got a very busy show for you. A lot of news that's happened over the past 24 hours as we look to what is going to unfold with the president of Ukraine arriving in Washington, D.C., asking for more money, more weapons, and some major admissions from the head of NATO about exactly how this war started. So if you thought World War III was not going to happen, well, guess again.
And is Nipah virus the new pandemic? Well, you may think, oh, that's in Asia. I don't need to really worry about that. You do, because the NIH is working on a vaccine in Maryland. We're going to tell you all about that coming up.
Also, well, we'll talk about Russia reinforcing, because it's amazing to hear Ukraine talk about the number of forces that have been totally decimated. And now Ukraine is even admitting that Ukraine will only survive if the West supports it and funnels people and weapons and money into that country. But they've now admitted that Russia is reinforcing itself and they don't need third parties to help them. So we will take you to the new training and frontline firefights as Russia forces are reinforcing. All of that, plus we'll talk about Canada, we'll talk about fat shaming, we'll talk about all of it as Redacted starts right now.
Hello, Patrick in New Jersey, Wayne in Panama. Thank you for joining us from around the world. This is the show where we talk about the things that the mainstream media spins like a top. We try not to spin it. We are avid researchers and longtime journalists. You come here for truth, as close to it as we can find, with no agenda whatsoever, even things that make us uncomfortable. So thank you for joining us. We are a married couple. Our production team are brothers. This is a family show. We've come for a family affair. We try and use family-friendly language, Clayton.
I try.
We do that also in the newsletter.
But it's the Philadelphia that comes out of me sometimes when I get angry.
We're going to keep it PC. Our newsletter, also, we try and keep fairly PC. You can find that at redacted.inc. It is totally free. It is a daily newsletter, comes to you in the morning, right when you wake up. And it has a lot of the stories that we talk about here on the show, plus actually even more. And it's a great place to go for original links to the resources that we talk about. A lot of times we get comments saying, where are links to all these stories? The newsletter is the best place to do that. So please do follow us. It's a fun newsletter. We write it with some humor, some levity that is necessary in this world that is so stinking crazy. So especially as, war rhetoric is flying at us hard and fast. So yes, the newsletter, we very much appreciate your subscription. Again, it's totally free, redacted.inc.
Yes, that is the way to go. Pooch.
Can I chime in?
Yeah, go ahead.
Chime in really quick. And just a correction from my point of view. I don't think we're PC. I don't think we're politically correct. I think that's exactly what we don't do around here.
Oh,
we just don't swear all that
right.
often.
Good point.
Okay, yeah. I guess you would use that to mean in a different way, right?
Yeah. Politically incorrect. Well, Bill Maher's famous show, Politically Incorrect.
Right.
Back in the day. Yeah.
PG is what I meant. I meant PG.
There you go. There we go.
Right.
Yeah,
and actually, we're more PG-13. Sometimes I say hell.
Wow. Look at you.
Whoa.
Yeah. Pooch in our chat says, hey, can we talk about the United Auto Workers strike? We're not covering it in tonight's show, but yes, we will cover it in the newsletter tomorrow, the United Auto Workers and what that's going to...
And the strike in Australia for natural gas, which is going to affect everybody, especially Australia is one of the largest exporters of that, and winter is coming, at least in the northern hemisphere.
Yeah. All right. Let's talk about. Let's go to Washington. So let's start with this. Only cowards fear World War III. Those are the words of famous military general Sean Penn. You might know him from the famous World War II battle, the battle at Ridgemont High. You hear about that battle? He's a great military strategist.
Is that from TAPS? No.
No.
Was he in TAPS?
I don't know where he was from. He was in Ridgemont.
Oh, right. Ridgemont High. He was also in TAPS. He was a crazy guy.
Oh, okay.
In TAPS.
No, I was just making this up as a joke. He was not in World War II, nor was he a great general. But Philip, what were you going to say?
Oh, I was going to say he wasn't the crazy one in TAPS. That was Tom Cruise. He was the more like rule follower.
Okay, I got that mixed up. We messed up all of our movie metaphors. Sorry.
Yeah. So Sean Penn, let me do that again. Only cowards fear World War III. Those are the words of famous military general Sean Penn. You might know him from the famous World War II battle at Ridgemont High. More on the great general's words in a minute. But first, this Babylon Bee headline sums up our corporate media over the past 24 hours. Take a look at this. Journalists anxiously wait for email from Biden administration with today's instructions. I love this. Of course, it literally is satire, but it's true, right? It's totally true. America's corporate media works at the pleasure of the regime. And get ready if you live in the United States, because the corporate mainstream media is about to unleash a whole lot of fake news about the war in Ukraine, starting with a huge PR push for Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky. So Zelensky coming to Washington, D.C., of course. There he is in his T-shirt. He got a new green T-shirt. And he came there in order to ask for more money and more weapons for NATO's war against Russia. And the media are doing their part in a coordinated PR push for the war. So at the exact moment that the United States Congress is facing a debt ceiling battle and the U.S. is totally out of money, the media narrative is this, that Ukraine could win, but they're struggling against the Russian forces. The way that they win is a big injection of money and weapons from the U.S. and from Europe. To achieve this goal, the print media, of course, will run a series of fake articles talking about Russia's brutal invasion. Just like this. So here we go. This is the Telegraph today. Mood sours in Ukraine as it braces for a long and bloody war. The published feature pieces like this about all of Ukraine's war dead. They'll show graveyards, tombstones. They'll explain that the United States is letting these men die unless we give them more money. Mouthpiece of the deep state, of course, is CBS News, and they're leading this charge. Yesterday, they started their morning on Face the Nation with actor Sean Penn, pushing for much of our needed money and military power in Ukraine, explaining that the U.S. hasn't done much to support Ukraine. This is his great thing that he's really upset about. That, we've been too cautious and we haven't done enough. And this is his greatest regret. Just a reminder, we've already spent over $300 billion. The United States and Europe combined over $300 billion, according to the numbers out today. And that's, in my estimate, a very, very conservative estimate, because that's really just since the war began. But as Victoria Nuland and NATO has admitted, we've been spending billions of dollars in Ukraine since 2014. So it is not just the past year and a half. It's all of the money that's been preemptive to bring us into war. But we're too cautious, according to Sean Penn.
It's my absolute feeling that the caution with which the United States has pledged support, which seemed, in my reading of February 2022, was like a lean on in the fear of nuclear conflict. Something I think all of us should look very carefully at and understand that, of course, is possible, and that's to be concerning. The likelihood is extremely low, and as one of our witnesses in the film says, are we going to let a gangster with nuclear weapons dictate the way we live?
Yeah. Which gangster are we talking about here?
Yeah, he didn't mention Biden, but I assume he's talking about Putin. Okay. I assume he's talking about Putin. But are we going to let a gangster... So it's kind of funny, because here you have Vladimir Zelensky, who literally is threatening Europe. Over the past few days, in an interview with The Economist magazine, Zelensky has basically said, unless Europe steps up and puts more weapons and more money into Ukraine, then all those refugees you guys are helping out with, what's to say that they're not going to get angry and potentially, carry out some, I don't know, maybe terrorist acts? He didn't say the word terrorism, but of course we know what he meant, right? Like, what happens if you abandon all of those Ukrainians that are refugees now throughout Europe, scattered around? Like, we'll just activate them like some sort of drones? Like, they'll just pop up one day and do the bidding of carrying out terrorist attacks?
You could look at that as him putting a hit piece on every Westerner.
I guess so. So who's the madman then? Who are you talking about precisely? And too cautious, Sean Penn? We've been too cautious. We just haven't sent enough weapons. Are you kidding me? What do you want? You want nuclear weapons there? You want to send nukes there is basically what you're asking for, because a number of members of Congress have asked to send nukes to Ukraine. Yeah, let's give them nuclear weapons. That'll work out really well. Just like the jets and the HIMARS and everything else that we've sent.
You're getting depleted uranium now. So if you want dead children and fallout to people in that area forever, you got that too.
Permanent cancer.
If your wish list is total destruction of that region, you are getting it. So,
but don't worry. The Pentagon says, and Corinne Jean-Pierre says that depleted uranium, like it's fine. Just the cancer is not an issue.
And when she told us last year it wasn't fine, she didn't mean it. It was a joke. Sometimes I tell a joke about weapons not being bad.
That's a whole joke at the White House. So Sean Penn also said that he wanted to melt down his Academy Award and turn it into bullets that Ukraine could use against Russia. Okay. Then last night, CBS rolled out even bigger guns because this was part 2 of their propaganda. So in the morning on Face the Nation, they had Sean Penn with his whole Ukraine documentary. And then at nighttime, it was CBS 60 Minutes, which had a big interview, of course, with Zelensky himself. And in less than 2 years of this war, Zelensky has given more interviews than all of the leaders involved in World War II during the 6 years of war. Just think about that for a moment. Churchill, Roosevelt, all of them. No interviews compared to what this guy has done. So 60 Minutes used to be the gold standard of broadcast journalism. Now it's simply a tool of the regime. And I just have to say, last night when they started off this, first of all, let me just set the stage here. CBS 60 Minutes, for whatever reason, will copyright strike our channel. I don't know what it is. It's 60 Minutes specifically. We can never show clips of that show. And they will take us down if we show anything of it. I don't know what it is about that show. We can't do it. If we do it, we get copyright strikes. It's exactly what happens. So anyway. So
we'll save you the pain of this love letter to war.
Yeah.
But and I will summarize.
What I will do is Scott Pelley. I will do my best Scott Pelley impression. And the way that he started off this piece last night was showing Zelensky sitting there as they're getting ready for the interview. And I'm going to show you a couple of still images from it. And I'm going to read Scott Pelley's transcript. This is word for word his transcript. I copied the transcript word for word. This is exactly how he introduced Zelensky last night in this piece. Okay. We first met Zelensky not long after the invasion, when his office was a blacked out bunker.
That's pretty good.
A year and a half later, we noticed a difference. As we were setting up the interview, the former actor used his talent to mask the strain. He smiled at a compliment to his wife, and then instantly he seemed pulled beneath a depth that no one could know. We don't know what he was thinking. It looked like empathy for the lost and for those who might be saved.
Oh, really? But what about the people who are being pulled off the streets right now and conscripted into war who had medical clearance because they were too ill? He wants them to be dragged into. He's not worried about saving them. He's worried about dragnetting them. Yeah. Are you doing your homework, Scott Pelley? What the heck is that? I'm struggling to keep this PG.
How exactly is that journalism? I'll ask you. CBS News literally making shit up. Looks like that empathy for the lives lost. Like, how the hell do you know?
And waxing poetic about his sentiment. What the F?
That looks like empathy for the lives lost. I mean, how do you know? Maybe he ate some bad sushi and it was coming back up on him. You know, he looked down off camera. We're not starting the interview yet. I had some bad lunch. You know, at the beginning of the piece, he also mentions that he was an actor. He was an actor using his skills to put on a brave face, he says. This is corporate media journalism in 2023. And meanwhile, to what Natalie was just talking about, back in Ukraine, video over the past 24 hours shows, once again, showing military recruiters grabbing men off the streets, forcing them to go onto the front lines in order to be killed by NATO. Here's a new recruit, clearly happy that he was just walking down the street when these thugs grabbed him and threw him into a wagon. Put him in there. You're going to war. NATO needs you. The few, the proud.
We need our bonus.
We need our NATO soldiers.
We got to hit our numbers. So I'm 16. Oh, well, that's okay.
And then last night at a bus stop, a man waiting for a bus, when a different mode of transport showed up to throw him into the meat grinder, you can hear the Ukrainian men actually yelling, hey, these people are worse than Russians, he says.
Стояв на зупинці, б'ють, пакують.
They got him. When he tries to run away. You're going to war when NATO needs you. It's amazing. I wonder if they showed this on 60 Minutes.
You know, if I were to wax poetic about the sentiment going through Zelensky's mind right now, if I thought he were an empathetic being, I might say he's really worried about his soul review in the afterlife, having dragged all of these men to their premature death. That's how I would narrate that, Scott Pelley.
No, but instead it was... As we were setting up the interview, the former actor used his talent to mask the strain. He smiled at a compliment to his wife, and then instantly he seemed pulled beneath a depth that no one can know. We don't know what he was thinking. It looked like empathy for the lost and for those who might be saved.
I know how everyone
that?
can be saved right now with peace talks. Right now. That's all you have to do. End the interview and go to peace talks.
Who wrote that at 60 Minutes?
The Pentagon wrote that.
Sitting there with a friggin' typewriter, like, we don't know the depth. We don't understand the law. I mean,
you are doing a very good Scott Pelley. You also have to sort of cross your hands to one side and lean over towards them. This is his body language, like that.
These fawning propaganda pieces. I mean, you're seeing it in print media. You're seeing it on your corporate media over the past, and you're going to see a lot more of it this week. So you guys are going to notice it. You're going to see it on CNN. You're going to see it all across Facebook. Your friends who are not enlightened, who are at least like not seeking the truth, are going to be sharing it. Yeah. In fact, hilariously, I won't name names, but someone sent a message to our family earlier today that said, hey, can you guys help? I have a brother-in-law who watched 60 Minutes last night and is now a Zelensky fan. We're like, what? Literally, that's what the propaganda is doing to people. It's wetting the whistle before someone arrives in the United States to ask for more money and more weapons. And here's CBS creating a piece of war propaganda.
Well, here's some cliff notes about that. Zelensky has been involved in terrorizing people in the Donbass since the Maidan coup, supported by the West. And Ukraine was told in 2014 to stop spending $1 million per day to terrorize people in your own country. That has continued. Once Russia moved in to make it stop, Ukraine acted like the innocents that had never been firing on anybody. We don't understand where this came from. And now we have Zelensky to prop up as the good guy, to pretend that there's not blood on their hands. Russia's holding the line for those people who voted to become a part of Russia in order to stop being terrorized by Ukraine. If Russia pulls those men away, those people go back to being terrorized as part of Ukraine's borders. So Ukraine is throwing innocent lives at that wall, knowing that it will not change. We've shown you the borderlines many times. It has not moved one single bit. So why are those men being dragged to their death? That's what you should tell your brother-in-law.
So back home, neocons like Mike Pence, running for president, by the way, to keep the war machine going.
Him.
Mike Pence, reminding all of us that American forces will need to fight against Russia unless we pump them full of weapons and money.
I am convinced that if the Ukrainian military doesn't stop and repel that Russian invasion, it's not going to be too long before that Russian army crosses a border that our men and women in uniform are going to have to go and fight under our NATO treaty.
Yeah, so we will go. So we will send Americans to fight in NATO's war against Russia. That's exactly what they want, right? Tucker Carlson just a few weeks ago talked about the hot war that is coming. We know it's coming. They want war with Russia. 100% they do. They've been calling for it. This is why they won't let Trump become president. I'm telling you, this is why the deep state and the neocons do not want Trump in there. Exactly, because they want a guy like Mike Pence, pencil dick, who wants to push us into war. Now, not all Republicans are warmongers, and not all members of Congress are warmongers or weasels, just like the Democrats are, who become like the party of war all of a sudden. Remember, they were like the hippies, like peace, 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 and now they're fully involved in this. You have Anna Paulina. I want to give credit where credit is due. Anna Paulina Luna, over the past 24 hours, saying that she will not vote to fund the U.S. government in this debt ceiling battle unless funding to Ukraine is finished. Good for her. I will call that out.
Yeah, and the Mary Poppins jacket. I love it.
Yeah. Stylish and anti-war.
Yes.
Good.
She's my new favorite.
I wasn't sure. I'm not sure if she stood up for ending war in Syria. I'll have to check her voting record on that. But
we'll
so I
pause
don't want
on
to
the
give
favorite, but the code is my favorite.
But I will say, at least taking a stand against Ukraine funding for war, that's one good thing. This is an amazing piece of news that happened over the weekend as well. You have Jens Stoltenberg, of course, the head of NATO, coming out and saying, admitting what we've been saying here for a year and a half or longer, that this war, when they say, oh, this is a unprovoked war in Ukraine, that was a total lie. Of course, this has been going on since 2014, and the genocide that's been happening in the Donbass has been happening since 2014. Let's not forget that. So Jens Stoltenberg comes out and admits, finally, that this war is not unprovoked, and the whole reason that this war started is because of NATO's aggression and enlargement. Watch.
President Putin declared in the autumn of 2021, and he actually sent a draft treaty that he wanted NATO
how to prevent war?
To promise no more NATO enlargement.
Oh, you mean that would have prevented the war?
What he sent us.
Oh, okay.
And that was a precondition for not invade Ukraine.
Oh.
Of course, we didn't sign that.
Of course not.
The opposite happened. He wanted us to sign a promise never to enlarge NATO. He wanted us to remove our military infrastructure in all allies that have joined NATO since 1997, meaning half of NATO, all the Central and Eastern Europe. We should remove NATO from that part of our alliance, introducing some kind of E and B or second-class membership. We rejected that. So he went to war to prevent more NATO close to his borders. He has got the exact opposite. He has got more NATO presence in the eastern part of the alliance, and he has also seen that Finland has already joined the alliance, and Sweden will soon be a full member. This is good for the Nordic countries, it's good for Finland and Sweden, and it's also good for NATO, and it demonstrates that when President Putin invaded a European country to prevent more NATO, he's getting the exact opposite.
Do you understand the logic there?
We provoked him, but
he offered a draft of, we will not do that if you don't expand NATO to our doorstep, which is, by the way, what Bill Clinton had agreed to, which is what the charter in place has been since the 1950s, that it would not enlarge to their doorstep. So you violate that, and you continue on in violation of the agreement that you had, and right up to their doorstep. Again, just think for a second. If Russia had military bases in Mexico, in Canada, and they just kept moving closer and closer and closer and closer, what would we do? So it's hilarious that he finally admits that this was not an unprovoked war. Oh, we had a draft agreement of how to prevent the war, but we wouldn't agree to it. Of course we want NATO to expand. We want to use Ukraine in order to provoke Russia and expand NATO. That's exactly what it is. So Zelensky will be in Washington. He's there asking for more money. I wonder if he'll do another big joint session of Congress. He'll hold up another Ukrainian flag. Everyone will sign it. He'll do a big thing. He'll wear his T-shirt in Congress.
And Sean Penn will get more proxy TV interviews.
Oh, yeah.
That's so weird, like bromance we all are asked to buy into.
We need him to get more Oscars. We need him to get more Oscars so they can get more bullets.
Right. He needs to win more Academy Awards.
Gold bullets.
So he can melt that down. Who knows what that's even made out of? But yeah, that's really great. That's great. That's good stuff.
We're assuming. And Graham points out that Sean Penn was also a big fan, I forgot about this, of Hugo Chavez. He had said that he is an inspiration. So his picker's off, I'm going to say.
We've got more news to get to here on your Monday. Good to see all of you. By the way, I should mention over on Rumble, we just hit 400,000 subscribers, 400,000 followers on Rumble. Good to see all of you on Rumble. It's amazing. So
Yeah, it is.
Rumble is a free speech platform. You should totally, follow us over there. And thank you guys so much for support on Rumble. They have been amazing. Rumble has been an amazing partner. They were. When we launched our 9/11 documentary, they promoted it. They did an amazing job. Where basically YouTube was like, no, it'll be censored and demonetized on YouTube. But Rumble was like, no, we'll promote it. We will show it and promote it. So thank you to Rumble, and thank you to 400,000 of you who are now joining us on Rumble as well, and the 15,000 now of you that are watching us live on YouTube tonight. So hello to all of you over there. We've got more news to get to here on your Monday. We're going to talk about. We're going to talk about the new virus because lockdowns are already here. It's already happening in India. Concerns over the past 24 hours of businesses being shut down, schools being shut down because of the new pandemic, and they're rolling it out already in India. So we will get to that. But first,
we want to tell you about our friends over at Bambi, because when you're running a business, your employees can create all kinds of interesting situations. And if you are not trained for human resources, you should not DIY that at all. I always think that in this day and age, when you can so easily say the wrong thing, hurt feelings, get yourself caught up in some kind of accusation of aggression or something. See, Siri, my watch is saying Siri doesn't understand, and I don't understand either. So you should hire the experts. You need to talk to Bambi. With Bambi, you get access to your own dedicated HR manager starting at just $99 per month. They're available by phone, email, and real-time chat. So onboarding and terminations run smoothly. Team members reach peak performance, and your business stays compliant with changing human resources regulation. Again, you just have to imagine that human resources in this day and age, one employee says something well-intentioned, but it's not the right thing to say in these days, and you have a time bomb on your hands. You should just not do this by yourself. With Bambi's HR Autopilot, you'll automate important HR practices like setting policies, training, and feedback. So schedule your free conversation today to see how much Bambi can take off your plate. Plus, just think of the savings, because if you can pay one low monthly fee instead of a full-time salaried person with benefits and payroll tax and all of that stuff, give it a try. Go to Bambee, that's BAMBEE.com right now and type in Redacted under podcast when you sign up. It'll really help the show to let them know that it's us that sent you. And just sign up for a free consultation. Again, that's Bambee, BAMBEE.com, Bambee.com, and type in Redacted under podcasts.
Now, someone in the chat said, hey, you have 400,000 of you watching right now. You guys should spend less time with your open of our show. And I just want to be clear. We are live at 4 p.m. Eastern time. But we start the countdown before the show at 3:30 Eastern time. So that because it takes YouTube a while to send out alerts to everyone. A lot of people don't even get notified, but if their notifications go out. And so sometimes it takes them 10, 15 minutes for notifications to even show up. So we start the countdown timer about 30 minutes before the show. It's our pre-show. And then we start hopefully at 4 p.m. Eastern time. We had a little question. We were dealing with something on this 60 Minutes issue before the show, talking about that. But normally we start right at 4 p.m. Eastern time. So,
and you're free to come early and chat with other folks.
Yeah, and if you're watching the replay later, just fast forward that 30 minutes. We always start the chapter like at 30 minutes in, so you can start it. Watch the chapters later if you like. So go ahead, Philip.
I was just going to say that many people actually enjoy sitting in the pre-show 30-minute countdown, and they chat with each other, and that's where the community's happening,
Yeah, I watched it for a little bit today.
Yeah, I'm getting ready for the show. We're watching the chat, so we're all there, like hanging out before the show, before we
seeing who's there, what's going on. Sometimes I ring in too. So anyway, all right, moving along. Is Nipah virus the next pandemic? Already there are lockdowns in India, but before you think, okay, well, that's in Asia, I don't have to worry just yet. Well, take a look at this. The NIH, that's Fauci's agency, has been testing an mRNA vaccine for Nipah virus since last year. And do you notice here, take a look at this screen, where this mRNA Nipah virus vaccine is being tested?
Bethesda, Maryland, if you're driving and listening to us on the audio version of it.
Well, that's not in Asia. We've been told that there have been breakouts in Malaysia, in India, in other places in Asia. why then would there be vaccine research in Maryland? So don't feel too safe about this. This bad virus, again, has only been observed in Asia, but it's being worked on in a lab in Maryland. So where did they get the material to sample to make a vaccine? Aren't you curious about that? I'm kind of curious about that. We're going to go over that in a minute, what we know about this vaccine. But first to the outbreak. We're being told now people are in masks. We're watching businesses shut down, lockdowns, mass testing, and contact tracing, all the things. So watch the media report about this and how serious they are taking it.
Authorities in southern India are rushing to manage an outbreak of the deadly Nipah virus. 2 people have died. Hundreds are being tested as potential contacts. Salima Shivji is in Mumbai with the details.
Officials are on alert and taking precautions in the southern Indian state of Kerala because of this Nipah virus outbreak, particularly in the Kozhikode district. Some schools are closed, banks as well as government offices. Shops are shuttered and the streets are a bit empty. People are a little nervous, and not just because of the loss to business, says this shopkeeper. After COVID, now we have this new virus and everything is shut again, he says. The Nipah virus spread through contact with fluids of infected bats, pigs, or people is rare but has had. Previous outbreaks do paint a scary picture. During the first one 5 years ago, 21 out of 23 infected people died because of the Nipah virus. Now, authorities say that in this case, they are taking every precaution possible. Kerala's health minister says all of the close contacts of those infected are being tracked and they are in isolation. At least 700 people have been confirmed and identified as people who have had some sort of contact with either the victims or those who are infected, and they are being tested for this virus. Police are monitoring vehicles at checkpoints, and the state has set up containment zones in the district where the infections are clustered. The federal government is also rushing in help, sending in experts to help with monitoring the spread of the virus as well as with contact tracing, while infectious disease specialists are working to study the strain of this virus known to be so deadly, with the state on high alert. Salima Shivji, CBC News, Mumbai.
Okay, so let's get to this death rate in just a minute. I just want to go over briefly that Nipah is a zoonotic virus, meaning it comes from animals. It was first discovered in the late 90s from pigs. Symptoms include fever, headache, signs of respiratory illness that can lead to brain swelling, seizures, or coma. Now, what she said here is that it has a death rate of 40 to 75%. That is a big range, 40 to 75%. And she credits health agencies with those numbers. I was not able to find out which health agencies have actually calculated that number. I saw this number cited on the CDC, the WHO, and the NIH. They all use that number without attribution or citation of a study. So I'm not sure how they come up with that. But of course, that sounds like a really terrifying number, especially given that now the death rate for COVID is so low that we're like, well, we went through COVID and we're here. So I can't verify that, but they're going to yell it at you 40 to 70%, 40 to 75%. Now, again, let's look at this mRNA vaccine that the National Institute of Health began last year. They started this in 2022 before Dr. Fauci retired. So this is a Fauci-approved study. We're going to assume he was paying attention to greenlighting vaccine trials, right? And not too busy going on national media. The trial began last year, and according to clinicaltrials.gov, was completed. The last update was just last week, September 13th. The test was done on 40 people, so they're trialing this vaccine on 40 people. That's not a big sample. And they were only testing different doses, all in 2-dose vaccines. So one shot, a few weeks later, another shot, right? I guess that's the way we're doing it now, this 2-shot vaccine, because they just went straight to, we're going to give them 2 shots of this amount, and then another group, 2 shots of this amount, then another group of 2 shots of this amount. No results have been posted yet. But when we hear about this vaccine, let's keep in mind that this is what they told us, the NIH. Take a look. They are not testing to see if it prevents transmission. of Nipah virus, nor are they testing to see if it prevents severe infection of Nipah virus, hospitalization, or death. See here, they are only evaluating the safety and tolerability, and also secondary. Look, that's their secondary goal. The primary outcome is just to see, do people get hurt from this vaccine? The secondary outcome is, do they then develop an antibody response? Now, we don't know if antibody response means that they will do better if and when exposed to Nipah. We do know from this trial, they are not testing transmission.
Joshua Raymond, $10 super chat says, so where's the Indian reporter's mask? It's great dinner theater.
Yeah, I don't know.
And how do we know that this virus exists? I saw someone in the chat saying, sad that they believe that this virus exists. It's a great point. Like, who's doing the verification of this? Who's doing the verification?
Okay, but we're making decisions, like we collectively, let's pretend we're all in a dinner group and we have to say, this is what we know about it. Let's assume that it's real and then look at the data in front of us. So let's pretend, right, that, I mean, I don't know. I have not observed it. I'm going to knock on wood. But what I do know is that the NIH, which was involved in the development of the COVID vaccine, and hid a lot of information in the development of that vaccine and allowed the media to tell us that that vaccine prevented transmission, is now testing another vaccine, and they are not testing transmission. So I do not want to hear that this may prevent the transmission of Nipah virus or protect you from it when they're only testing whether or not people don't get hurt by the vaccine and if they get antibodies. And we don't know that antibodies will actually lessen the severity of Nipah virus. So we need to keep that in mind. Okay. Now, one more thing about the Nipah virus clinical trial is that it has only been observed in Asia, the actual virus in the wild. Why would it be tested in the U.S.? This release here says that they used a prototype pathogen. That means they have representatives from viral families with pandemic potential. Where did they get that?
Fort Detrick, maybe?
Did they make it? Is it safe? Is it a spin-off?
It's like,
of Nipah virus? Wouldn't you want to know this? I mean, NIH is taxpayer funded. So these are really important questions like, hey, where'd that come from?
Hey, where'd that COVID
is it
come
safe
from?
In there?
Where'd that COVID come? Oh, it was just something. It was from the Spanish flu from early 1900s. And you guys decided to take that out of cold storage and to start playing with it again. Where did this come from? Is this some sort of a leak? You guys are playing with this at Fort Detrick like the other stuff, bringing it out? Why is it in Bethesda, Maryland? It's a great question.
How did it get there, right? And so...
And shouldn't we call these people before Congress and ask them, how the hell is this here?
Yeah.
It's apparently killing people in India, and why is it in the United States? How did it get here?
It's just a very strange word, right? Prototype pathogens. Philip, what does that say to you? Does that say that they came up with a near approximation or that they took it from an original sample?
By the way, if you're new to the show, Philip has a degree in molecular biology, right? So that's
no. I don't have a degree. I studied molecular biology.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. He's not a scientist, but he plays one in television. So yeah, what do you think? A prototype of this? Like, what does that mean then?
It is not a term that I'm familiar with, a prototype pathogen. So it could be.
They admit
basically the way I'm reading it is that they created something that works like the pathogen they're working on, but I don't know. I would have to look up that specific term. I'm not familiar with that term or what that would mean.
Okay, so there's two possibilities. They had a sample that they took from India that's uncomfortable, or that they created a
more
synthetic.
likely scenario is B.
Or that they created a synthetic of it.
Yeah.
Either way, are you comfortable with it on U.S. shores, right? This is something that the public should know about. Now, why is this being greenlit without us knowing about this thing? This release says that the NIH did this as part of its pandemic preparedness plan developed in early 2022 in response to COVID. This is the first clinical trial using prototype pathogen approach since the plan was put in place. So we are to deduce from this there will be more. They are going to come up with more synthetic viruses and then try and make a vaccine about it. We should know this, right? Maybe we want it, maybe we don't. but we should be eyes wide open here. And they will be messing around with more prototype pathogens for possible pandemics in the future. So we again, that's great. Are there no other biolabs in and around Asia that might want to work on Nipah virus?
What about the 46 biolabs in Ukraine that Hunter Biden was involved with?
Okay,
and
setting
US
those
government?
aside, right? And I know we don't have a high trust factor of biolabs in Asia at this moment, but you might think that there's some there capable of coming up with a treatment to Nipah virus. Does it have to be transported across the world? Is that safe? These are questions we absolutely should be asking.
One question we asked is, what is a prototype pathogen? Just representatives from the viral families within a pandemic potential, according to the National Institutes of Health. The characterization of which is used to develop the medical countermeasure solutions, vaccines, monoclonal antibodies. So they are representatives from the viral family. And
see, that's not clear, though, right? We still could have those two possibilities. Either it's synthetically created to represent what they know of the structure of this virus, or it's a piece of it that's been manipulated. We just don't know. So
they don't do gain of function research. They don't do any of that stuff.
Of course not.
That's all conspiracy theory.
All right. Well, let us know what you think of this in the chat and how comfortable you are with this information being disseminated to you about Nipah virus.
Sometimes I'm sarcastic, and hopefully all of you, the 30 or 40,000 of you watching right now, understand that I'm being sarcastic. But sometimes, I'll see a comment. They're like, Clayton, I can't believe you think that they weren't doing gain of function research. Just want you to understand I'm joking. I'm not being serious. Yes, I'm being facetious.
All right. And Grimm says that prototype pathogens are what they use to create the zombie apocalypse. That's what that's for.
Yeah.
So,
World War Z.
That is what it sounds like.
That's exactly what it is. I know it sounds conspiratorial, but here we go. That's exactly what it is. All right, we've got more news to get to here on your Monday. We are going to go to the front lines and look at the reinforcements that Russia is now putting in place with their forces. Live fire, live training exercise with their forces right now in what was formerly Eastern Ukraine. And so this is what has NATO really, really scared. We're going to show you that next. Also, we're going to talk about Dove, the soap, has a new fat ambassador, and it's causing quite a bit of outrage, but it might actually be Unilever that we really should be shining a light on.
That sounds like you're calling her fat. She's a fat empowerment ambassador. Fat is not the adjective Clayton's using. This is her. She's a fat empowerment.
Isn't that her official title? Fat empowerment ambassador?
Right. She doesn't call herself a fat ambassador as if she has to be fat to get the job. Oh, okay. She's a fat empowerment ambassador. Wait a minute, I think that word is...
Wait a minute. Hold on a second. I'm a fairly skinny guy. I could lose a few pounds. Could I, look, what if I decided one day that I want to identify as fat? In this day and age, in 2023, we can do that, right? So what if I want to apply for the job as fat ambassador to Dove? And I'll say, I'm identifying as fat. But they're like, no, you're kind of a skinny guy. I'm like, no, but I identify as fat. I identify as morbidly obese. I want the job at Dove as your new fat ambassador. And they'll say, sorry, Clayton, you can't get the job. And I would say, that's discrimination.
Maybe.
I am fat, and you can't tell me I'm not, and that's discrimination. In 2023, that's the kind of crazy shit we're dealing with.
Because you just made that up.
I made it up, but I know someone's thinking about it somewhere.
Yeah, you're the one bringing the crazy.
That's what I do.
You're the one for me, fatty.
You strike me as more of an Irish Spring guy anyway. I don't know.
Yeah.
I do like the Irish Spring. To me, that's like the smell of soap, like Irish Spring. That's like,
me too.
That's like, when you think of soap, that's immediately my brain goes to Irish Spring soap.
Isn't Irish Spring also made by Unilever?
Maybe. I don't know. Back in the day, they weren't. But doesn't Unilever own everything now?
Oh, no, they're made by Colgate.
Colgate, okay.
Okay.
Which is, and it makes a great toothpaste as well, Irish Spring.
What the hell?
It's Monday. I've had a good night's sleep, so I'm a little, a little crazy today. We've got more news to get to here in a moment. And again, we're going to get to all of that. But first, I do want to tell you about our friends over at Private Internet Access. You can get 83% off Private Internet Access with 4 months for free right now. Because, look, online privacy is being invaded left and right. I mean, your internet service provider literally knows everything that you do online, how you bank, what times of the day you're using the web, what you're buying, everything. Everything. Over 30 million people have signed up for private internet access, our sponsor. If you go to piavpn.com/redacted, you can protect your browsing. You can be able to access shows on Netflix and all these other things from around the world. If you're blocked in certain areas, because we run a news organization here, there's literally websites we cannot access on a regular basis because of our location. They will block internet access to different news sites. And that's crazy. And so with private internet access, you can get around all of that. And if you haven't heard of the law in Canada right now, Bill C-18, this bill has just been legislated. It requires the big digital companies to compensate Canadian news websites for sharing links on their platforms. That's led Facebook, Google to block Canadian news from their platforms. So Canadians then don't have access to their local news websites anymore. And now you have a solution, private internet access. So you can use that app. It hides your IP address. It lets you appear on your device in a totally different country. I like using Iceland. Iceland's a good place. They have really secure internet there. So I like using Iceland as my location. You have 84 countries to pick from. So just connect to a server and get around those government restrictions. So if you want to enjoy all the benefits of private internet access, now's the time to subscribe. Head over to piavpn.com/redacted. Get 83% discount. We'll have a link in the description if you miss it or if you're driving. That's an 83% discount. It's just $2.03 a month. You also get 4 extra months completely free, but you have to use our link in order to get that extra bonus. piavpn.com/redacted. Every one of our devices has this installed on it. You need a VPN in the year 2023. One last time, piavpn.com/redacted. All right. Well, the head of Ukraine's military intelligence service has just admitted in an interview with The Economist magazine, listen to this, that Ukraine has effectively run out of men and resources. He said the only thing keeping Ukraine basically from collapsing is Western money and weapons. He said that Russia, however, is self-sufficient and able to reinforce itself without outside help. Again, this is Ukrainian head of intelligence. And we sent journalist Patrick Lancaster to see how Russians are reinforcing their positions right now as they carry out live fire training exercises. Watch.
I'm Patrick Lancaster, and this is a special report for Redacted. Behind me, you see Russian forces, specifically the Pitnashka Battalion. And we're here at an undisclosed location near Donetsk, near the front line, but not on the front line. This is a training ground. We're going to be seeing the Russian forces train on how they go on assault runs against Ukraine. It should be pretty interesting. We're going to see how they learn and how they fight.
Апачи. Привет.
And now the training of live fire is going to start. He's about to throw a grenade. Should be pretty interesting.
Сел. Пофигу, потом подымешь. Давай, садись. Два стреляем. Почему лево, право, лево? Бросил, вот.
Hello.
Hello.
Can you tell us where we are and what we're doing today?
We are in Donbass and we are fight.
And you speak good English?
No.
Where are you from?
Where from? The North Caucasus.
Russia?
Yes, of course.
And why are you here?
I defend my country in here. The people
in here. I want to defend him from house in other side.
And what's your name?
Arslan.
And how long have you been fighting?
I? Not so long time.
Are you a volunteer or drafted or?
No, I'm volunteer.
Why?
Because I need here. Need
you're
was here.
needed here,
Yes,
yeah?
yes, of course, yeah.
Okay. And what's your specialty? What do you do?
I don't speak this about this.
Okay, I understand. Secret, yeah?
Yeah.
Okay, what is that?
Учение. Training fight.
Thank you very much.
If you want, this my picture on this site.
What is that?
It's from my country and my nation, Abaza.
Well, thank you very much.
Of course.
Yeah?
Thank you.
All right, so the training here is over, and now we're going to head back to the base, you can call it, or the field base, the trenches.
Давайте в колонну, ребят.
Не уверен, как он повелось.
Сел на охранение. Боевое охранение. Такие вот игрушки.
А это не должно быть что? Японский понимаешь?
This has been a special report for Redacted. You've seen what we can show you here on the Russian Forces Training Ground. This behind me is a T-80, and we can see the fencing on the top is actually being installed now in Russian tanks to protect against Ukrainian kamikaze drones. So it makes the explosion happen just before it hits the tanks. It's a nice little addition to the report here, just to see some insight into how the Russians are fighting, what you won't see in the Western mainstream media. So stick with us. There's a lot more to come.
Thanks, Patrick. You're absolutely right. In fact, over the past 24 hours, we've seen like CNN doing in-depth reports. We're on the front lines with Ukrainian soldiers. They'll never show you the other side of this, and so that's what we attempt to do here: show you the other side, and you can draw your own conclusions. Then you can watch CNN, you can watch Patrick's report, you can watch and see and make your own determination. It's amazing though they're having to retrofit these tanks with like a canopy to protect them against drones that are like dropping on top or dropping some of these munitions on top. That's that's crazy. That's
and
astonishing.
that is a brutal cat toy.
And that always ends up happening in these war zones. They end up like modifying their tanks with little things and tweaks and having to reinforce the armor, and as they learn as they're going along. It's
but
insane.
have you picked up on this line too in the West that Ukraine only has so much longer because the winter is going to stop them? It will get cold, right? We are continuing to give them the weather as some kind of excuse to prolong the war rather than go to peace talks.
Well, we keep hearing we have 40 days left. 40 days. That's what Mark Milley said. 45 days last week, he said. Now, it's like down to 40 days left, and that's it for Ukraine, and we better pump them full of weapons. That's why the timing of all of this is amazing. So you have Zelensky coming to Washington, D.C. this week, and he's asking for more money and more weapons, and the timing of it. You see CBS doing their big 60 Minutes reporting, and Sean Penn is out there. It's because the timing of this right now, they need money, they need weapons. The military-industrial complex needs more money, and so that's why you're seeing all of this propaganda right now. They need a Christmas bonus. That's what they need.
All right. Before we move on, we want to talk about this next story about Dove and their fat ambassador. I did the exact same thing I told you. Fat empowerment ambassador. I'm not calling anyone fat. I don't do that. But it's a fat empowerment.
But if that's her title and that's what her name is, and she's the fat ambassador, is it okay to call her?
No, I'm not going to participate in that. I read a whole book about this, about how like you should call people fat to their face and not make it an undesirable.
But I'm saying that's her title.
Yeah, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to call people fat as in it's a neutral descriptor.
So you're dead naming
I
her.
will not do that.
Just call her the ambassador of fat. Dove's ambassador of fat.
There you go. Yeah, she's not a fat ambassador. She's the ambassador of fat. All right.
This only really makes sense in the way that we like put our adjectives around our nouns.
I know, that's good.
So, okay. Let's first talk about our friends over at Policy Genius, because of course it's important to make sure that your family has a plan if you are not around to take care of them. And this is just one of the ways to be a diligent adult, is to make sure that you have a plan that is not contingent on your family's survival if you're not around. If you have a family like I do, you know how much your loved ones depend on you. And in a worst case scenario, you don't want them to worry about money. A good life insurance plan can give you peace of mind that if something happens to you, your family has a safety net to cover mortgage payments, college costs, or other expenses, so they could get back on their feet and focus on what's most important. Maybe you think, oh, but I already have coverage through work. Well, employer-sponsored life insurance may not offer enough protection for your family's needs, and it definitely won't if you leave your job, so you don't want that as your only life insurance. Let me tell you from experience, you can visit Policy Genius, and you will get life insurance brought to you. Now, they don't have any one insurance company that they are going to put for you. They will do the search for you. It's a search engine of all policies that might best fit your needs. They know how valuable your time is. That's why their technology makes it easy to compare life insurance quotes from America's top insurers in just a few clicks to find your lowest price. With Policy Genius, you can find life insurance policies that start at just $292 per year for a whole $1 million of coverage. Some even offer same-day approval, and you can avoid the unnecessary medical exams. Policy Genius has licensed award-winning agents who can help you find the best fit for your needs. They work for you, not the insurance company, so you know they're not recommending one for their own benefit. Policy Genius is for parents, caregivers, anyone else who has people who depend on them. They simplify the process of getting life insurance so you can protect the people you love. That's why they have thousands of 5-star reviews on Google and Trustpilot. Your loved ones deserve a financial safety net, and you deserve a smarter way to find and buy it. So head on over to policygenius.com or click in the description to get your free life insurance quotes and see how much you can save. That's policygenius.com.
All right. We want to thank everyone for subscribing to the show here. Again, we just hit 400,000 on Rumble. So thank you so much for all of you out there who seek the truth and, and aren't stuck on the corporate media bandwagon watching, CNN and all the billionaires that fund those operations. So thank you guys so much for that and supporting us.
All right. Well,
you all right?
Pull up my notes. Yeah.
And thanks to all of you. Thanks to we got a couple of new members as well. So nice to see David Bensavenga. Am I saying that right? As a new member, thank you for becoming a rebel. Susan Coffey as well for becoming a rebel and joining our Rebel Plus community. So thank you guys. Spooky Spoon says Redacted Rebels have the best chat room. Thank you guys so much. You guys are very kind. All right.
Okay. Well, Dove Soap has a new fat empowerment ambassador. Fat empowerment goes together. I'm not calling her fat. I just want that to be clear. This is a 22-year-old black woman who tells us what it's like to take up space in the world as a person in a larger body. This is what she looks like. Her name is Zayana Bryant. There is backlash to this whole notion of fat empowerment, but let's set that aside for a second. There's also backlash to who she is. Because she's done many controversial things. But let's see if let's just think for a second if that is a distraction. Because Dove parent Unilever is able to sort of stand by her like, well, we stand for, marginalization and marginalized communities and intersectionality. But they can say that, but it's not true. They do not care about women. This is a story that's a distraction from the fact that Unilever is made with slave labor. Dove would like us to think that Ziana Bryant is a marginalized person and she is worth our attention because she is an obese black woman. I'm sure that's a hard life. Yes. You know what also is a hard life? Being a factory worker for Unilever in Kenya and being raped. That's also a hard life. So here is a tale of two woes. One woman says she's representing marginalized people with obesity. Another is a group of factory workers who are starving and terrorized. Which marginalized group do we want to pay attention? This is a truly horrific story. Unilever, they position themselves as this sort of pedantic, good doer, women empowerment movement with ads like this. Like, oh, yes, so empowering, she's not a size 8 supermodel, not overly thin. Now women with ads like this, we feel seen, right? Okay, but let's look at some other women that maybe we might collectively like to empower. This is the Caraco tea plantation in Kenya, owned by Unilever, because they also make Lipton tea. These women are paid by the kilo, about 10 cents. For every kilo of tea leaves that they harvest. They work 7 days a week from 6:30 in the morning until 6:30 at night. In 2007, there was a riot after the presidential election was announced, and the 100,000 residents of the plantation area were terrorized, many of them killed, most of the women sexually assaulted. Here is a summary of that from 2 eyewitnesses written by journalist Maria Hengeveld for Plow. I'm going to summarize it, but if you'd like to pause the video and read it for yourself, you can. So these witnesses said that they told Unilever that there would be violence. And they said, oh, okay, what they did then was they put security around the houses of management. And when the violence did inevitably erupt, they evacuated only management. Now, again, I want to, there's a little bit too much there for me to say how much of the detail. It's really hard. Now, some said they knew the uprising would be coming, and they said, well, if we're not going to get security, can we have a leave of absence? And Unilever did not grant those requests. Instead, they left those employees there to be graped without the G in front of their children. Their homes burned, looted, many of them killed. No one knows how many were assaulted, but court records show that at least 3,000 homes on the plantation were looted, 2,000 destroyed, tens of thousands of residents fled. Unilever closed the plant and did not pay those workers for 6 months. When they brought them back as an apology, they gave them a 1-month salary. And they even told those workers, you have to come back to work. You may be working alongside your attacker. If you see somebody with something that they stole from you during that uprising, you are not to say anything. You have to work here. And if that guy's got your stuff, too bad. That's how it goes. Those workers actually formed a group and sued Unilever in London. They argued that the parent company was responsible for this. Unilever pushed back and said, yeah, but this is just one of our subsidiaries. We can't really be responsible for protecting them. This suit should have been brought in Kenya and not in London. The court sided with them. They lost. They got nothing. Unilever was able to sort of walk away from this. Now, in the US, we agree that if you get hurt on the job, if you slip, right, or you get hit in the head by something, then the company better cover your expenses. In Kenya, however, I guess you can get sexually assaulted on the job, and it's not the company's fault.
Yeah, they don't care. I wonder if they even sent them like free soap. They didn't give them anything. $150, and you got to keep quiet.
Yeah,
they're going to protect your bosses, but you got to go back to the tea plantations.
Right. And again, I showed you this already, that when they came back to work, they had to work alongside their attackers. And we're told, if you see someone with your stolen belongings, you must not protest. Okay. Now,
can you imagine, though, just think about it for a second, the ads, like where they say, all right, we're showing these like, overweight women. It's empowerment. We're Dove. We stand with these overweight women. That's a real woman. What about showing these women who work in your Kenyan tea fields and doing an ad campaign for those women?
No,
these are real women who work for Unilever, but we can't even show them. We don't want you to know about those women.
Yes.
So we'll use these other women in that way.
Now, when they lost their case in 2018, what these workers did was appeal, and they lost again, but they also appealed to the United Nations. The United Nations will not do anything about this. Do you want to know why? Because Unilever is a partner with UN Women alongside the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, Procter & Gamble, the Rockefeller Foundation, and Coca-Cola. Take a look here. This is their website proclaiming that Unilever is one of their business and philanthropic partners for UN Women. Here is where they describe just how wonderful Unilever is for collaborating and contributing to women's empowerment in many areas. Okay, so Unilever can pay lip service to gender equality and pay an obese spokesperson, because that is a fight that they can stand behind on social media and say, hey, we stand for body empowerment, right? You can go mess up your pathology, be as fat as you want, and we stand for it. Even though, okay, let's talk about how healthy it is to be that way. But question, do you think that these women whose homes were looted and burned and got sexually assaulted in front of their kids, do you think they have any idea what it means to be empowered to be as fat as they want? What do you think that means
They're lucky
to
enough to
people
have
like
that kind
that?
of food.
Right. I don't think they have any notion of that kind of affluence and privilege, that you can just be like this. So let's talk for a short minute about what it means to be a fat empowerment influencer, as we sort of like juxtapose these two stories. Here is Diana Bryant announcing her partnership with Dove.
My belief is that we should be centering the voices and experiences of the most marginalized people and communities at all times. So when I think about what fat liberation looks like to me, it looks like centering the voices and the experiences of those who live in and who maneuver through spaces and institutions in a fat body. It looks like making accessible spaces and having conversations that are aware of the fact that people have different bodies and that they are interacting with space and people and institutions and communities in a different way. Fat liberation looks like fully embracing those differences and having those conversations instead of shying away from them. To learn more about fat liberation and the campaign for size freedom that Dove is supporting, visit dove.com/size freedom. Tap in, join the campaign, support the campaign. This is important and we should all be talking about it.
Yeah, it's really important. We should all be talking about.
All right,
fat
marginalized,
liberation.
right? Marginalized communities.
So what you're saying is
marginalized voices at the center.
So what you're saying is, so these spaces that our bodies need to move through, we need to make sure that airplanes are now enlarged to make sure that we have the space to allow these bodies to move through it. So we make aircraft a certain size. We need to pass laws. We need to pass laws now that Boeing or these other companies enlarge the size of transportation in order to accommodate, right? That's what we're talking about. That's what she's saying.
No, that's not what she's saying. She's saying she wants fat conversations at the center because fat people are a marginalized group.
But she's saying okay, fine. But she's saying my spaces that our bodies are moving through.
She's not talking about actual. She's talking about moving through the world and centering the voices of fat people.
Okay.
Now, I recently read a book all about fat empowering that talked about how you should use fat as a neutral descriptor. And if your kid in a store says, look, that guy's fat, you should say, yeah, isn't it great? Everyone's different size. You should never use fat as any kind of undesirable thing, period. I have a hard time, not feeling like she can't move her face properly. She can't emote as with a lot of movement because she's
encumbered.
It's hard to not feel like, why would you want that for somebody that you loved? And I don't want to be mean about it at all. But I do want to point out a little bit of controversy about her that's separate from this. She once falsely accused a white girl of saying something racist at a Black Lives Matter gathering in her university, and the white girl was stalked for it. She says it ruined her life. She was canceled. The white girl said that people stalked her. Later Bryant said that maybe she didn't actually hear that. She was comfortable saying that about the white girl, but said maybe that wasn't the case. She has also called for defunding the police. But when the Daily Mail showed up at her house for an interview about this Dove campaign, she called the police. So yes, the irony. Because people find her, to be this like extremist person. Now they're calling for a boycott. Let's leave aside for a moment that fat empowerment is not an empowering thing at all. It's extremely hard and unhealthy to live that way. We are allowing transhumanism into our lives to pretend otherwise, to pretend that anyone should think of this as a neutral body descriptor and not something that encumbers your daily life. But just like in the Mulvaney Bud Light case, there was cause for backlash to Dove a long time ago. It is possible that corporate America masks their true bad behavior with the culture wars. I think that's what we're seeing, so that it can righteously and ceremoniously stand on top of this, scream about fat empowerment while not actually empowering plantation workers. Do you see the contradiction here? I'm putting together two groups that we're calling marginalized, and we're only going to scream about one of them because it makes us feel good on social media. You choose which marginalized group should have our attention. Should Dove get the credit for fat empowerment movement, or should they actually just do the right thing in other ways and put the woke shit behind us? You let us know what you think of this in the chat.
Also, can we have a conversation about how Unilever, as the owner of Dove, stands to make a lot of money by pushing the idea of being overweight and unhealthy?
Why? Because you have more soap, more body mass to watch?
No, Unilever owns all sorts of other brands that have nothing to do with soap.
Oh, it's not about surface area. I just did the calculation in my head.
They own sandwich meats and mayonnaise, and Unilever makes all sorts of things, all sorts of processed food things that we would love our overweight, not healthy bodies to be eating. That's fat. We're at fat acceptance here at Unilever because, we want you to eat our highly processed food. We need to keep America the fattest country in the world. And how do we do that? We need fat acceptance. And shame on you for saying that that's unhealthy. Shame on you for saying that, she can hardly speak because she's so large. Or shame on you. And so Unilever needs to make their money and their profits behind it. It's like the shaming of people who are being anti-vax, right?
It's literally related to every risk of cancer. Right?
Yes.
So many diseases. And so we're empowering you to do that if you want, right? As opposed to actually like taking care of tea plantation, Yeah. So I don't want to hear it, but I just talked about it for 15 minutes. I don't want to hear it from them. I do want to hear from you what you think.
Just let's think about the amount of, doesn't Unilever own, I think Unilever owns Ben & Jerry's ice cream. Am I wrong? Can someone correct me on that? I'm pretty sure they own Ben & Jerry's ice cream, if I'm not mistaken. I think a few years ago, Unilever bought Ben & Jerry's. I think Unilever owns Breyer's ice cream.
They do own Ben & Jerry's. Yeah.
Oh, so we need
Cornetto.
We need fat acceptance so you can eat your freaking ice cream. Come on, guys. This is the
Magnum. They own a lot of ice
cream.
Again,
this is like the vaccine. This is like being anti-vax, and then you have all these companies. Oh, you're against the COVID vaccine. Oh, okay. Well, then you're anti-science, right? And well, no, but Pfizer needs to make a lot of money, so we need to make sure that we're pro-vaccine and all of those things. We need to make sure that we're all supporting that so that Pfizer and Moderna can make all their money. In the same way that, Unilever needs to make processed bagels so their fat ambassador can eat them, and we shouldn't comment about it. We should just be quiet about it. It's the unhealthiest thing in the world, and America's the fattest country in the world, and Unilever needs to make billions.
There are other fatter countries than America.
I think America's the fattest country, is it not?
It's not.
By obesity? By BMI? Is it Mexico? Mexico and the U.S. go back and forth.
No, I think it's a Samoan island or something like that. Yeah, there are fatter places, so don't get excited about that.
All right. right. All right. Let us know in the comments your thoughts on this. As C. May in the chat says, yeah, they are sugar pushers. Yeah. Yeah, there you go. Let us know your thoughts on this in the comments below. Hey, we do have a community. We would love for you to join our community. If you'd like to support independent journalism, you can come over to redacted.inc and become a member of our Plus Club today. We've got some great content over there, exclusive interviews and content that you will not see anywhere else. And just for the price of a cup of coffee once a month, you can support what we do here on the show. That's right. Very, very simple to do. Go to redacted.inc. And we're going to talk about Canada in just a second. We've got some great content, about Canada that we've done privately in our group that we share before anyone else gets to see it. But we're going to talk about the Trudeau government in just a second. And again, it's so easy to do it. Just go to redacted.inc, click on that button, become a Redacted Rebel Plus member, and support independent journalism. Again, redacted.inc. Well, the Trudeau government wants you to mask up and be punished if you don't do it. And the trucker convoy trial continues in Ottawa. And David Creighton, journalist for the Post Millennial and Creighton's Right on YouTube, was in the courthouse 4 days this past week here covering this trial. And so a couple of big stories that are sort of all molded into one, David, right? I mean, we have this mask mandate push by the health minister in Canada, which we'll get to in a moment. But really, the trucker convoy sort of sits at the center of all of this as a metaphor for what Trudeau's Canada has been doing to its people, no?
Precisely. And I don't think there's a better description of it than it has become a metaphor for what's wrong with Canada in terms of the authoritarian measures the Justin Trudeau government has initiated, how it came down so heavy on this trucker convoy, and how it's taken two protesters and somehow elevated them to be the great leaders, the grand poobahs of this whole movement, when in fact they were just people involved in a very organic movement that happened. Truckers all came to Ottawa. There was no preparation or planning, no grand plan, no great scheme. Tamara Leach and Chris Barber were there. They took some control because they needed some management and organization, and both of them had those skills. But they have become the martyrs of this freedom convoy. They have become the victims because the government is not just after these two people, these two peaceful protesters. It wants to make an example of peaceful protest that is contrary to the policies of the Liberal government. And that's all this is about. And the prosecution can keep saying this is not about the political beliefs of Tamara Leach and Chris Barber, but that's precisely what it's about. It's about people's political beliefs that collide with the political beliefs of the Liberal Party and Justin Trudeau.
It's a great way to sum it up and really set the stage. So you were in the courtroom this past week. Describe for us what you saw from both the prosecution side and the defense side in this trial as we've now, I guess, into the second week of this thing.
Yeah, and I want to say before I even describe what happened, we are days behind now. This should have been the midpoint of the trial after 8 days. 16 days were scheduled for this provincial courthouse for this trial. It's way past 20 now being scheduled. I predict this trial will go into November. And this is really all about an attempt by the prosecution to wear down the defense and everybody in the courtroom with just endless information, pictures, videos. And it's really becoming just not annoying, but you wonder what is going on here. And the defense is almost pulling their hair out, saying, is there any way to shorten this trial? Should never have come to this anyway. These are charges that should have been dismissed or at least not go into a trial of a month or longer. But the prosecution continues to unroll video after video. They have a police officer on the stand who nods and says, yes, I remember that video. I recognize those snowdrifts. And it's becoming almost absurd. It's like theater of the absurd is how I describe it. But you know what's interesting, Clayton, is that every video, even the ones the prosecution is unveiling, confirms what the defense is saying about the two people being prosecuted. that they came to Ottawa with peaceful intent and consistently and constantly told everybody in the convoy to, one, act peaceably, be peaceful in your protest. Do not disturb the residents of Ottawa by doing anything that's going to cast a bad light on this protest. And listen to the police. Do not defy the police. Do not disobey the instructions of the police. Work with the police. I've heard this time after time in all of the videos, and you scratch your head saying, what is the prosecution trying to prove? What evidence have they got here? Because in all of the videos that they're showing that were broadcast at the time on Facebook and on TikTok and other social media, all confirm what the defense is saying. This was a peaceful protest, and these two are nothing more than martyrs of the Trudeau government.
So the defense is saying that these were peaceful protests. What is the prosecution saying about Tamara Lich and Chris Barber, calling them what? What exactly is their argument?
They said from day one of this that, one, this is not about their personal politics, which actually produced a few gales of laughter at the time when they said that, because it's just absurd. And two, that this is about a protest that was anything but peaceful. But they've yet to produce any evidence of that. And I don't know where they're going to produce that evidence, because the only people that weren't peaceful during this protest were the Ottawa police, the Ontario Provincial Police, and the RCMP, which at one point rode right over a woman in a walker, and several times beat up people who were protesting, including one journalist who was physically assaulted by police. The only violent people in this whole protest were the authorities, and there was no violent protest in Ottawa by any of these protesters, and I was there for the whole duration of this protest, cold weather or not. I didn't hide in my cubicle on Parliament Hill. I didn't hide in my office like the CBC and CTV did, never wandering out to even talk to these protesters, just dismissing them like Justin Trudeau did as a bunch of fringe elements. And the Trudeau, of course, said they were a bunch of racists and misogynists. And actually, he's the one that's demonstrated racism and misogyny throughout his life. So once again, this is incredible to watch. But you know what's happening here. It's an attempt to just lengthen this trial as long as possible and hope something sticks to the wall. I've heard so many people say that. It's almost like the prosecution just hopes something is going to stick to the wall. They're throwing everything up there. Maybe something will work. So far, forget it.
Meanwhile, you talked about the RCMP, the Royal Canadian Mounted Police running over a woman, in a horse over a walker. Of course, using the police to go after people that will not wear masks. This has been the argument from the Trudeau government, particularly Theresa Tam, who we heard from this week at an event where she's wearing a mask with the rest of the board, the health ministry board. They're all there in masks, encouraging Canadians now to mask up once again, and making the argument that we should enforce these things with police presence and basically rat people out if they're not wearing masks. I mean, it's like they have amnesia, and we're returning back to pre-COVID times again, going back to right as the pandemic was unfolding and these draconian measures are put in place. So what do you know about Theresa Tam's statements this week? Really got under a lot of people's skin, especially the Canadians watching our show.
Well, Theresa Tam mouthed the talking points of the Chinese government throughout the COVID crisis. She's Canada's answer to Anthony Fauci. And she reversed herself a number of times, just like Fauci did, on what was safe and what wasn't safe during the pandemic. But she's a lifelong fan of masks. There's no question about that. As you have said on Redacted several times, these masks are toxic. They're no good for you. And even if the material is okay, what is the sense of sitting there all day, breathing in your own germs and your own carbon dioxide? These masks do nothing, absolutely nothing, to stop the spread of the COVID-19 virus. She knows that. If she's anything as educated as she claims to be and her statistics say she is, why does she not know this? Why is she continuing to advance falsehoods? We know now these masks did nothing to stem the pandemic. We know they are potentially toxic. The NIH in the United States admitted that early in the pandemic, that there's toxicity to these masks, that they're not safe. So what is she doing? This is a trial balloon for the Trudeau government to see what the reaction is. And I tell you, I was disgusted with that journalist in the crowd who applauded the fact they're all wearing masks when we're not in a pandemic. What are they wearing masks for?
Yeah, the journalist.
No reason for it. And he went even further and said he's really, really not happy about the fact that people are not walking around outside in masks. I mean,
wow.
Where are these? Where is the mind of these journalists? It's like you said. It's like they have gone back into a time warp. We're back in January 2020, February 2020, when we didn't know anything about these masks, when we thought the vaccine that was eventually going to be produced was going to be completely safe, that we knew nothing about the future. These journalists and these government authorities are acting like we're back in 2020 again, and that they are going to get away with these mandates, that people are going to submit, and people are going to say, I guess the government knows best. I can tell you that even in Canada, that people are saying the government did not know best. The government does not know best, and we are not going to submit to these mask mandates and get vaccines for the rest of our lives, because this is madness.
Do you think that we will see mandates? I mean, I know we're starting to see a number of them popping up in different quarters, but will Canada go into a hospital or health service building mandate or public transportation mandate for masks?
I can't see how Justin Trudeau won't try it again, but I envision there's going to be a pushback that he cannot imagine and he's not thinking about. He believes the Canadians are going to be subservient to the government, that they're going to accept these mandates again, these lockdowns. I don't believe it's going to happen, but I do think he'll try. And I think the provincial governments, much like the U.S. state governments, who were so enthusiastic about locking people down, telling them what to do, while they themselves, of course, ignored all of these mandates. They ignored all of these instructions and just lived as they chose, lived as they pleased. The provincial governments in Canada will probably try this again. Maybe not Alberta and Saskatchewan, where the resistance is very high. Ontario, Quebec, other provinces will try this again. I've no doubt. But I'm telling you, there's going to be a fight on their hands. And if Justin Trudeau tries to engineer this from a federal level, he's going to get a pushback like he's never experienced before.
From your mouth to God's ears, I hope that that's the case, that people will fight back this time, say we will not comply. That is absolutely hope so. And you're starting to see that, I think, more and more in the United States as well. We are not going to comply with this BS ever again. David Creighton, great to see you. Thanks for keeping thanks for keeping Canada honest to the best of your ability. And we'll keep an eye on what happens with this trucker convoy trial as well as the crazy Trudeau government. David, great to see you. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much, Clayton.
And thanks again, David. And thanks to all of you for subscribing and being a part of our show here. We're live every day, Monday through Thursday anyway, at 4 p.m. Eastern time. So we hope you can join us and make it appointment viewing. We'd love to have you here live, interacting here in our chat room, dropping us, a few likes if you wouldn't mind, hitting that like button and subscribing, whether you're on Rumble, on YouTube, or on Twitter as well. I should mention that we have our community, which is our Redacted Plus membership, which is, again, for the price of a cup of coffee once a month, you can support what we do here and independent journalists that we're able to feature here on the show, because we are not billionaires. We are not run by billionaire media corporations. We are supported by you, the viewers. So again, we don't have the backing of Pfizer and Moderna and all of these people. And if they came to us and asked us to sponsor, we would say absolutely not. Sorry, we won't do that. But we are supported by you. So if you would like to support independent journalism, please come over to redacted.inc and click on our community button right there. And then you can become a part of our private community where we release videos early. Exclusive content that you won't see anywhere else is all released right there. Plus, it's just a great community where people interact, and we have a lot of great people who are Redacted rebels over there. So come join our Plus community. We really, really appreciate it. And we will be back here tomorrow, Tuesday, at 4 p.m. Eastern time. Now, have a great night, everyone. Bye now.